Joyquilts, our Dross in Alberta. What we're doing today is doing another border or another quilt with collision borders, which means the center of the quilt is quilted separately. The design fits pretty much between the borders, and then the border will be done separately, top and bottom first, and then we'll turn the quilt and do the two sides. The interesting thing about this process is there's always a calculation involved trying to get your center to start where you want it and stop where you start it. The quilt has a certain amount of shrinkage that occurs as you roll it through. So we have a pretty good handle on it. We've been doing this for a while. So now what's happened is when I do that first, I put the machine on full blast and I turn it so that the sewing doesn't happen. So basically the machine is just going to trace where it would actually drop those stitches. When we get it right, we go back to the beginning, turn the thread back on and go. So what I did was I turned it up full blast, and then when I put actual thread in, forgot to turn it back. So this is a sulky blendable thread. We like to quilt at about 50% with this one because it's a 30 weight and it's very fluffy. It does tend to break. Okay, so we're just going to handle that thread break. Told the machine to go back to the closest point in the design, so I move it back about a ½ an inch or so because I really want to pull up the bobbin thread. And then what we're going to do is bury those threads. Take my soft threading needle, which has become my best friend, and bury the threads. So I'm going to start again and carry on from where we left off and just come back and repair that in a little bit. So what we're looking for here is that this big oval hits right about this line. We want the whole thing to hit right on that line. So that's basically where we're going with this. There are people out there that quilt off the quilt. We don't do that. I guess coming from hand quilting, we have a bit of a different eye to it. We like to have our quilting about a ½ inch in from all the edges, maybe, and it'll be about a ¼ inch by the time you trim. So it'll kind of hit nicely onto your binding. Top and bottom the same. It involves a little bit more work. There are people that'll quilt right off the end of the quilt and just not worry about it. But then you really can't do these border treatments because you have to have it end in a certain spot. Otherwise, the border's not going to work. So we'll let it go one more and see how it goes. This is a double link quilt. Which is one of our patterns. A lot of piecing in it. There's a lot of small pieces, so for the machine too, it's probably just as well to let it go a little bit slowly. But now using this number 9 foot, which is the one that came with the machine, it prevents the flagging of the fabric, which would cause skip stitches. We found that out the hard way. Thank you to Bernina for that jewel of wisdom, because we could not figure out what was going on, but that's what it was. The foot that we were using gave great visibility, but it didn't push down enough on the top, so the foot would kind of drag over the fabric and make a big stitch quite often. So the way you do these borders is you program a separate quilt for the top and the bottom for the border. Then you program for the center of the quilt. And then you program another one for the sides. So what we'll have to do is ungroup our design and see how big each pattern repeat is. And add probably one more for the sides. The Leaforama pattern that we're using here is quite large in the center of the quilt. And on the border you'll see that it's quite a bit smaller, which is one of the nice things. The software allows you to manipulate the design to whatever size that you want. So we'll be back with quilting that bottom border. Or actually I might just leave it till we get to the sides. But yeah, that's hitting pretty much where I want it because the borders will nest into each other a little bit. And it being fabric, it's going to move a little bit anyway, so it's not a perfect, it's not ever going to be perfect because a human did it. you kind of aim for the best that you can get, and that is good. Joyquilts at joyquilts.com, hotmail.com, Facebook, and Instagram.